Today with a video. This is a level up video. This is a video just to get you overall better when it comes to approaching and thinking about the Dragon Ball Super card game from different perspectives. And this here is taking a bit of information that we've had on the Patreon before, putting it on a more public forum, and then kind of just going over some things and some good examples to help you as you head into this new world, a world that people usually aren't familiar with. They could be coming back from the game, never had to deal with the problems of other decks before, or this could be something that people just don't think about, or they see the conjecture online and think that X dude who made random X post is the smartest man alive. So today we're going to talk about some things to help you siphon through all the stuff that's online and find the best ways to approach right now. Before I get started in this video, let me go shout out to my sponsor, Alec Pastrana, Bearded Collectibles, best shop owner on the planet. If you haven't got your sealed product for Series 10, make sure you do your pre-orders through Alec Pastrana now. He has the best prices on sealed products, best customer service, and you can pick up some merchandise like this Team Bearded hat. You can pick up the 3XG Productions t-shirts, whatever you want to do. But anyway, let's go straight into the video. So today we're going to be talking about Juggernaut formats, metagaming pitfalls and triumphs, the things that can cause you problems, ways you can overcome them, and then also just what is a Juggernaut format in general. So let's start with that. What is a Juggernaut format? So I like to use this as opposed to the verbiage of Tier 0 format, because I think there's a stark difference. Tier 0 means there is no better strategy at any given time. You have one deck that is definitively always the best deck and best deck choice in every single tournament. I don't think we're in that space. I don't think we've ever been in that space. I do think, though, we've had plenty of Juggernaut formats. A Juggernaut format is when you have a singular strategy that then completely warps and shapes the way that the metagame then looks moving forward as it continues to be the top contender in the metagame. So starting with Bionic Strike Mecha Frieza, probably the closest to a Tier 0 format that we've ever had, but still not 100% Tier 0. Archetype was incredibly strong. You had the ability to play multiple different shells between veggies, between apes, between GT, that allows you to do things that other people couldn't compete with. It wasn't fair. Until, they had the release of SS3 Goku, which SS3 Goku was the only deck at the time that could keep up with Mecha Frieza just due to the ability to untap 3 energy at the end of every single turn to defend itself. But then, once Mecha Frieza was changed, SS3 Goku then became the next Juggernaut, because you could do the same thing. You could play it in any given style of deck, and then you could always come up with a deck that would be the best for the current metagame. You had Mono Blue, which was really good against aggressive strategies. You then had Green Blue, which beat the Mono Blue deck, and then Red Blue, which ultimately was the best deck in that format, and was the deck that everyone went to. But then, introduce Hirudegarn as well. When this card attacks a leader card, choose one battle card in your hand, place in your drop area. If you do, draw 2 cards. The leader, on its face, innocuous, but at the time was the best generically good leader. But what ended up making it so busted was the Storm archetype. Was Bardock the Progenitor, was Scrambling Assault Gun Sun Goten. And this leader, the reason why it did it the best is because of its Awaken at 4 or less life and choosing 2 of your energy and switching into active mode. So it made your untapped 2 leader even more busted. You had the best super combo in the game at the time, combined with the fact that you just had the best overall card pool to get through your deck the fastest. So Hirudegarn Storm was that Juggernaut deck that everyone had to form their game plans around. It's the reason why when you had Storm, you still had SS3 Mono Blue competing, is because that deck was a deck that inherently checked that deck, but at the same time, it was still susceptible to it. And of course, all these decks I'm talking about so far, all of them dictate the rules of engagement for the format going forward. You have to be able to operate on similar axes in order to be able to compete. Super Syndron the Almighty, another deck, completely warped the game. Because when you're taking an extra turn, you really only have a few options. Either find a way to beat them before it happens, or live and then be able to win afterwards. So again, another close to Tier 0 deck that existed that warped the game itself. And of course, as we know, went on to be changed. So SS3 Goku, Mecha Frieza have all been changed. And then Storm, Progenitor, and Scrambling Assault Sun Goten were banned. Striving to be the best was created, and Unyielding was limited to 1. Now it's officially banned. But so look at all these. All of them have a theme right now, right? Where they're all busted. They all warp the way that the game is played, and then inevitably they end up having something banned or changed. And then Broly the Awakened Threat, Yellow, generically good leader, had access to the best card pool, and was so dominant just because it could play just the best cards. Whether if you were playing the blue-yellow strategy, whether if you were playing Height of Mastery, whether if you were playing the green-blue-yellow strategy that came out, just in general, up until Surge Coup was released and Broly was changed, just definitively this was, the deck that you had to think about. This was the leader you had to think about. The Height of Mastery build was something that was format warping because it put your game in 4 turns. You had to be able to win in 4 turns or 3 turns if you're on the draw. So again, all these decks have something in common. They're all playing a different game than you were, and they're all just, in a sense, putting you in a position where you're having to do something equally, if not more powerful in response to what they're doing, but they just always did it better than you. So a Juggernaut format is when you have these decks that are sitting at the top that warp the way that the game is played, that change the way that the Dragon Ball Super card game is completely played. And so right now, I think we're pretty close to living in that world. I think that VegX is the next sort of Juggernaut deck because of the fact that it's going to sit at the top, and it does something that none of the other decks can do. Generating +2s, +3s every single turn just through milling, getting battle cards on the board. You have the combo variant of the deck. You have the mid-range variant of the deck. All of them are very strong. And I think right now we're operating in that world. And right now I think there's a lot of bad conversations about what people think is going to work. And so today I'm going to go through just pitfalls and triumphs of what to do and how to operate in a Juggernaut format. So first pitfall, X leader or strat just beats the deck. So people are doing this right now with Hatchak, with Topo. They're just saying that if you play this deck or if you play this leader, you just beat the deck. Okay, so first off, a lot of times people don't end up having the data to support that. They just ends up being a claim because they read card text and put that together. But actually playing through the games, understand that there's a play draw disparity. Understanding that one deck gets to operate as itself completely all the time, whereas the other deck is having to be the deck that answers it. And so there's always a rule when it comes to playing any sort of card game, playing Magic in general. You always want to be the deck that is forcing the other player to have answers or play answers. And so VegX gets just to operate as it wants to and can shift and manipulate its own game plan to be able to adjust accordingly to things like Topo, to things like Hatchak. So I mean, just understand that, just because you play X leader or X strategy and you sit down, you're not just going to be favored in the matchup. So that's just a huge pitfall. You can't write off this piece of information and say that it's fact without any sort of evidence to prove it. And then also remember that sometimes it's just relying on drawing the right cards. If you're playing each strategy, if you're playing Topo, you have to have Unison on turn 2. So if you're going second, the board's already going to get established against you. And even if you're going first, what if you don't have the Unison? You're already falling into a huge trap there. So first pitfall, don't just say or don't just think that X leader or strategy just beats the Juggernaut, just beats the best deck at the time. Triumph. X leader or strat is generically good against the field and has a way to beat Juggernaut. You need to be thinking to yourself, instead of thinking so narrow of playing Hatchak or playing Topo is going to be my answer to being good in this format. The answer is not that. Dragon Ball Super historically, no matter if you have a tier 0 format, no matter if you have a Juggernaut based format, people play what they want to play. So you're always going to be better off picking a leader or a strategy that is generically good against the field, good against the jungle, and has a way to beat Juggernaut in the 65, in the 75, depending on whatever your deck limit is. But that needs to be your approach in how you're trying to attack this format or how you're trying to collect your data. You don't want to just make an assumption, or you don't want to just play a strategy with hope that you're only going to get paired up against VegX every single round. There are some worlds where you can make that read, like in smaller fields. If you go to your locals and you know that everyone is going to be playing VegX, you can then make that read. But you're really just going to want to play a leader or strategy that is generically good against the field and has a way to beat it. A great example was Danny Hype in San Jose when Mecha was at its peak of its powers. Is Danny Hype made top cut based on the fact that he was playing SS3 with Chain Attack, Zeno, and Battering Laser. And he knew that playing Chain Attack and Zeno is generically a strong strategy, but decided to play that yellow and Battering just to get around Cold Bloodlust to reset the board against Mecha Frieza. So that's a great example of how taking a leader or strategy that's just generically strong and then adjusting it in a way so you can face down that big threat, face down, the Juggernaut at the time. Next pitfall, I just need to play X, Y, and Z to stay alive. Operating under the assumption that we're looking at all the decks from the past plus VegX, right? Playing stuff like Topo, playing stuff like Fine Nimbus, playing stuff, like Protector of the People. All those cards are great. the turn you use them, the turn you play them, and they're great, number one, if you draw them. If you draw those cards, you increase your chances of not dying on a given turn. And so the problem is people fall into this mindset of, I just need to jam these cards in my deck just to stay alive against this deck, or just to, hopefully not die on turn 2 or not die on turn 3. And there's a huge issue with that, is because, yes, you may be staying alive, but Vegex and other decks that have always been at the top, just because you stop them for a single turn doesn't change how strong they are. It doesn't change that they get to just do it again the next turn. It doesn't change anything. Instead, now people can just take time off, play a card to be able to accrue some card advantage past the turn, and then what you did, you minus yourself, and then if you don't have the ability to do something impactful on your turn, you're just having to face down that reality of they're going to do it again the next turn, and you may not have that answer again. So instead, you need to be thinking, I just need to buy an extra turn and punish them. You can't play a strategy that buys the extra turn and doesn't do anything with it. Testing extensively over the weekend and over the past couple of weeks, that is the truth within this format. You can play the card that buys an extra turn, but if you're not doing something that's either pressuring them back, forcing them into a difficult position, or retaking back the advantage, then what are you actually accomplishing by playing that answer card? You're almost better off not playing it in the first place. You're almost better off conceding the matchup, as opposed to playing a strategy that's going to buy that extra turn and then harsh punish them on the crackback. If you're not doing that, then you're doing it wrong in this format. And that's why decks like, in the video that I posted the other day about Reboot Gohan, the reason why is because Reboot Gohan has the ability to buy that extra turn and then on its crackback be able to get the game closed. And you need to approach deck building early in your weeks. If you're not playing something that's just generically good and can and can just also play against Vegex and be competitive, even if it's a 60-40 matchup, then you need to be working yourself to this belief or this truth, which is buying that extra turn and then being able to punish them. Next one, I'm going to only play test against Juggernaut. This is incorrect. This is not what you want to do. Is this matchup knowledge valuable? Of course it is. Being able to know how to play against the best decks is always something that's going to be beneficial in your approach to any given tournament. But the problem is when you do this, or you hyper-focus in, it skews your overall deck building, it skews your sideboarding, it makes you dedicate so many cards that aren't good against the rest of the field to this one specific matchup, and that just puts you at such a huge disadvantage. Going into, Nationals where Storm was the best deck, there were a lot of people, Young Badman, shout out to Young Badman, he didn't play Storm a single round in the tournament, and he was prepared for it. I mean, yeah, he made it a top cut, which is awesome, but he didn't even play against it the entire tournament. There are going to be tournaments where you don't play against the best deck in the game. So only playtesting against the best deck or Juggernaut is not going to be something that yields success for you. I am going to prepare for the jungle just as much as Juggernaut. This is the way you should be living right now. This is what you should be thinking about, because Series 10 opens up a ton of archetypes. It brings new decks to life. It brings old decks back into competition. And if you only focus your intention on Vegex or on Juggernaut, you're going to be playing a strategy that is poorly suited against the rest of the field. Think of something like Topo. How bad is Topo against any other deck that goes over the top? Bad. How good are these decks against Dredgeku? Not good. So it's like, you could beat this one thing and you could be prepared just to beat this one deck, but when you walk out into your tournament in round one, you get paired against a red aggro deck, or you get paired against a red-green arrival based deck that's trying to burn you out, or you get paired against Jiren. What are you going to do? Your tournament just isn't going to be on the back of beating the best deck. Your tournament's on the back of accruing enough wins over time against a varied enough field to be able to put your win percentage high enough to give yourself a shot at making cut. Then you can worry about beating the best deck and cut. But there's 6, 7, 8 rounds of Swiss before you even get there. So approach every deck that you think is going to be competitive just as much as you would approach playing against Vegex or Juggernaut in this case. Pitfall, I'd never play X deck. I'd never play the best deck. I'd never play Juggernaut. This is a huge thing that leads a lot of people to suffering, a lot of losses, a lack of success, because it's not just about not allowing yourself to play the best strategy at a given time. It's now limiting the information you're giving yourself. Because if you never play the deck, if you never play it in testing, you never learn it, then you're going to find yourself, you're not going to be familiar with their lines of play. You're not going to be familiar with what they're thinking. You're not going to be familiar with what they need to do on X turn to, to progress their game plan or progress the way that they want to win the game. And so by never stepping in those shoes and never play testing that deck or never playing it competitively, you're never going to know how to actually approach the matchup. You're never going to know what cards actually hurt, or how much defense does the deck have to actually defend itself, or what are the odds of milling your super combos and not drawing them, and then also how are you going to be able to read when their hand is weak? A lot of players can posture up and make it look like their hand is strong, but how can you know based off of the details the strength or the weakness of their hand or their game state? This is a huge pitfall. Next one, Triumph. I am going to master Juggernaut and use that information for my deck construction and selection. You want to make sure that you are taking the time to become a master at these strategies. You don't have to be the best pilot ever, but learning how all these decks works, learning the sequencing, learning, how to get the max value out of your mills and get the max value out of when you overwhelm versus when you switch from a 3-drop to a Nagrishi, and when to play your tag team trunks, and then how to make sure you can play multiple tag team trunks in a turn. Like, being able to find out how you get that value or structure your turns in a way where your sequencing is so optimal that you can awaken and then use that one energy again, or when to apply pressure with your attacks, when to try and close the game, when to use your Unison's ultimate, when not to, It's so important that you know this information so that when you start building the deck that you think is going to be able to be good enough for the field plus have game against the best deck, that's going to be the way that you end up seeing that result by not playing the best deck. When you just blatantly ignore playing the best deck and you just try and do something on your own without complete information or access to all of the information available to you, you're going to find yourself that your deck construction is always lacking. You could get 57 cards right, or you can even get 60 cards right out of your 65, but those 5 cards make a difference. If you pick the wrong cards for this matchup just because you assume that what other people tell you is the answer, you're missing out. Get complete information, master the deck, and then use that information going forward. So here's some MTG reference points. I know people hate when I reference Magic because I know the majority of this player base is Yu-Gi-Oh! But you guys have the same, you guys can take the same data points and apply it even with Yu-Gi-Oh! Because you know the history of your own game and your own formats. So these are just some snapshots of what worlds looked like in Magic the Gathering in 2016, 2017, 2018. Going into 2016, Bant Company, Bant Humans, etc., Bant in general with Collected Company was the best strategy, right? It was the juggernaut, you could say. And so everyone in Worlds of that year was tasked with picking either play it or beat it. Those are the 2 routes that everyone took. You look at the end of the tournament, first, second, third, fourth, 3 of those decks are playing Collected Company. 2017, you look at going into that tournament, Teamer Energy and Ramen Up Red were the best decks heading into that tournament. Teamer Energy definitively was what was considered the best or energy mechanic, or the energy mechanic in general, or decks that used it. Well, look at that tournament. Teamer Energy ends up taking first place. There's a lot of energy-based decks in the tournament. Same with Ramen Up Red. So people that were tasked with focusing on 2 decks still chose to either play one of the 2 decks. There were some people that did not. Some people got rewarded. Some people made it medical. But you're being rewarded for playing the best strategy at the time, and versus trying to beat it at the time. And then, of course, 2018, it was a red-black aggro mirror in the finals. Red-black aggro was the best deck heading into the tournament. And so, again, everyone is tasked with either playing it or beating it. People chose to play it, and that's what happens. I know we're not operating in that space. I know we're operating in the Dragon Ball Super card game when the field is more varied. But understand that there's a huge difference between this game and our game. In Magic and in Yu-Gi-Oh!, people spike and people play the best decks. Because winning is so important to them that they want to play the best strategy to have a chance at winning. In the Dragon Ball Super card game, it's much different. And you have to approach your tournaments much differently. If you knew for a fact that you were going to see Vegex in 3 out of your 7 rounds, you would take a lot of time to prepare for that matchup much more, and that'd become a lot of your focus. But now, since it's diverse, you're going to be seeing 1 to 2 copies throughout your events, and you might be seeing more of them in Top Cut, but everything is different in the Dragon Ball Super card game. And so even when you have a best deck, you can't just prepare like that's all that exists. So make sure as you move forward and make sure as you're testing, make sure as you're deck building, that you're focusing on ways to beat these strategies, because that's what happened in all these tournaments. In all these tournaments that I have listed here, everyone was either playing the best strategy or trying to beat the best strategy. That's what happened. And then sometimes the best strategy is just so good it still beats everything else. And you have to accept that that is part of the range. That is the risk you take whenever you are playing a given strategy, whether if you want to play the best or if you want to beat the best. And so take that with you as you move forward. It's okay to play the best deck. It's okay to try and beat the best deck. But when you're talking about a wide, varied field, you're always going to be better off playing something that is consistent, something that is strong. And you're always, as you're approaching your matchups now and going forward, it's always better to be the person that's presenting the problems rather than the person that has to present the answers. When you are in that space and you're building a deck that's reliant on X set of cards to be able to win X matchup, you're putting yourself in such a difficult position. So as you're building your decks right now, don't lose that focus. Focus on building the best, most powerful deck that you can build that does its things so good and it's so powerful that it can take advantage of any deck that's in the format, not just this one. I recommend playing really aggressive red strategies right now. Playing something that relies on Bardock the Resolute in red. I think that card is absolutely fantastic. It is what you want because you want to be able to play that game in the same space as Vegex does in the first couple of turns. You want to play any green aggressive strategy that uses Dormant Potential Unleashed to buy an extra turn against Vegex, something like Reboot Gohan. And the fact that green has 8 double strikers now is pretty amazing between Zarbuto and Dodoria from this set. So playing an aggressive green strategy with Dormant Potential feels very, like you can take advantage of that opportunity right now. So I really like those strategies. And then, of course, you can play Vegex. You can play the deck that does that or wins in those first couple of turns. Or honestly, at this point, if you want to try and counter all these strategies, playing something like Jiren feels like the right way to go right now. But in general, lots of rants, long talks. Thank you guys so much for sticking with me if you stuck with me this long. If you're looking for more content like this, check it out on the Patreon, 3xG Pro on Patreon. And of course, check out Beard Collectibles if you haven't gotten your cards yet. #ScrubFam is best fam. Okay, thanks. Bye!